an Iraqi tank commander in February 1991, there was one sound you absolutely did not want to hear. Not an explosion, not an incoming missile, just a sound. A deep, mechanical grinding from somewhere in the sky above you. Like a very large, very angry machine chewing through something it shouldn't be chewing through. By the time you figured out where it was coming from, it was already too late. That sound was the GAU-8 Avenger cannon, 7 rotating barrels, 30mm shells the size of your forearm, depleted uranium cores that don't just punch through tank armor, they shatter, ignite, and turn everything inside the tank into fire. And the plane carrying that gun was the ugliest, slowest, most ridiculed aircraft in the entire United States Air Force. The one nobody wanted. The one the generals tried to kill before it ever flew a combat mission. The one Congress saved at the last minute, over and over again, because the guys actually fighting on the ground refused to go to war without it. This is the story of the A-10 Warthog, the plane that lost every argument in Washington and won every battle it was sent to. To really understand the Warthog, you have to go back about 80 years, back to World War II, back to a plane that had almost the exact same reputation: too big, too heavy, too ugly, not glamorous enough for the fighter pilots who wanted fast and sleek and supersonic. It was called the P-47 Thunderbolt, and just like its descendant, everyone who actually flew into combat loved it, even if the brass back home didn't quite know what to do with it. The P-47 was enormous by the standards of its day. 7 tons of aircraft, an air-cooled radial engine so big it looked like it could eat a Spitfire for breakfast, and 850 caliber machine guns that could put 100 rounds per second through anything unfortunate enough to be in front of them. British pilots who first flew it joked that a Thunderbolt pilot could run and hide inside his own fuselage if a Luftwaffe fighter came after him. The P-47 was not a beautiful plane. It was nicknamed the Jug, short for Juggernaut, and it earned that name every single day it flew over Europe. But here's the thing about the P-47 that matters for our story today. It was unbelievably hard to kill. There are recorded cases of P-47s returning to base with half a wing shot off, with their engines full of holes, with their tail surfaces so damaged they barely existed. Pilots belly-landed burning Thunderbolts rather than bail out because they trusted the airframe to protect them. The plane could take a beating that would have destroyed any other aircraft and keep flying. That reputation was not an accident. It was a design philosophy, and that philosophy did not die when the war ended. Republic Aviation built the P-47. Years later, Republic was acquired by a company called Fairchild and became Fairchild Republic. And in 1966, Fairchild Republic was given a contract to design a new close air support aircraft for the US Air Force. They drew on everything Republic had learned building tough, ugly, purpose-built aircraft. They named the new plane the Thunderbolt II, a direct tribute to the World War II legend. The pilots characteristically called it something else entirely. It was officially the Thunderbolt II. To everyone who actually flew and maintained it, it was the Warthog, fat, ugly, and absolutely lethal. Is something you have to understand about the United States Air Force in the 1960s and 1970s. After World War II, when the Air Force became its own independent branch in 1947, it essentially decided that close air support, flying low and slow to protect troops on the ground, was beneath it. The Air Force wanted speed, it wanted altitude, it wanted supersonic jets, nuclear bombs, and the glory of air-to-air combat. Not a pound of airframe weight for air-to-ground became an actual Air Force development principle. That is a real quote from that era. That is genuinely what the leadership believed. Vietnam changed some of that thinking. Fighter jets flying too fast at too high an altitude to actually find targets hidden in dense jungle, and then running out of fuel before they could make a second pass, was not a great strategy. The old propeller-driven Douglas A-1 Skyraider, a plane that looked like it belonged in World War II, turned out to be more effective at close air support than any jet the Air Force had. One pass, haul ass became the depressing mantra of jet-powered close air support. It was embarrassing. So, the Air Force launched the A-X program in 1966. Attack Experimental. Not because they actually wanted a dedicated ground support aircraft, but because the Army was developing a very advanced attack helicopter called the Lockheed AH-56 Cheyenne. And that was money the Air Force felt should be coming to them. If someone was going to build a ground attack machine, it was going to be the Air Force, not the Army. So the program began, not out of genuine enthusiasm for helping troops on the ground, but out of inter-service budget rivalry. Honestly, as origin stories go, that one is very Air Force. Two companies competed, Northrop with the YA-9 and Fairchild Republic with the YA-10. Northrop's design was described by defense analysts as conventional and unimaginative. Its engines were mounted low and vulnerable to ground fire. Its single tail offered no redundancy. Fairchild Republic's YA-10 had high-mounted engines shielded from ground fire by the wings and tail, widely separated so a single hit couldn't take out both, and a design built around one specific weapon, the biggest aircraft cannon ever put on a production plane. The YA-10 won the competition in January 1973. The pilots named it the Warthog. The Air Force brass started trying to kill it almost immediately. So I have to stop here and talk about the gun, because the A-10 is unique in aviation history for one very specific reason. Almost every aircraft in existence was designed first and then fitted with weapons. The A-10 was designed the other way around. The engineers started with the gun and built the entire aircraft around it. Everything else, the wings, the engines, the cockpit, the fuel systems, was secondary. The gun came first, and what a gun it is. The General Electric GAU-8 Avenger is a 7-barrel rotary cannon that fires 30mm shells. Each shell is nearly a foot long. The gun itself, with its ammunition drum, is approximately the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, not a slightly large weapon. An actual car-sized object sitting inside this aircraft. The ammunition drum behind the pilot holds 1,174 rounds, and the gun can fire roughly 65 of them per second in the typical burst length used in combat. The shells themselves are the really terrifying part. They have depleted uranium cores, a material that is 1.5 times denser than lead, which means it hits with extraordinary force. But depleted uranium has two other properties that make it uniquely devastating against armored vehicles. First, it is self-sharpening. Unlike a normal bullet that flattens on impact, a depleted uranium round actually fractures into sharp fragments that keep penetrating. Second, it is pyrophoric, which means it spontaneously ignites when it hits air. So when the round punches through a tank's armor, the fragments that scatter through the interior are all on fire. Instantly. The A-10 doesn't just destroy tanks, it turns them into ovens from the inside. Because the gun is mounted exactly on the aircraft's centerline, the nose gear had to be offset slightly to the right to clear the barrel. That slight asymmetry in the landing gear is one of the Warthog's most distinctive visual features on the ground. Every design decision on this aircraft traces back to that gun. The entire plane exists to carry it into battle and bring it home safely. For 15 years after entering service, the A-10 sat in Europe, waiting. Built specifically to stop Soviet tanks pouring through the Fulda Gap, a war that never came, and then Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. Overnight, the Air Force was loading every available Warthog onto transport aircraft and sending them to Saudi Arabia. The plane nobody wanted was suddenly the only plane everyone needed. The results were staggering. 8,100 combat sorties, mission-capable rate of 95.7%, over 900 Iraqi tanks destroyed, 2,000 military vehicles, 1,200 artillery pieces. Out of 132 AA-10s deployed, only 6 were lost. F-35 today has a mission-capable rate of around 51%. The A-10 was twice as reliable in combat as America's most advanced fighter is right now in peacetime. There is a phrase that came out of Desert Storm that the A-10 community still uses today: go ugly early. Call the Warthog before you call anything else. The troops on the ground started saying it because when that engine sound came overhead, that deep, unmistakable grinding, the fight had already changed in their favor. April 2003, Baghdad. Captain Kim Campbell's A-10 takes a direct hit from anti-aircraft fire. Both hydraulic systems destroyed the systems that control every flight surface on the aircraft. On almost any other plane, that is an ejection situation. But the A-10 had a manual reversion backup, a purely mechanical system that lets a pilot fly using direct cable connections to the control surfaces. It takes enormous physical strength, and it works. Campbell flew her aircraft back to base for over an hour in that condition and landed it safely. She landed a plane that had no right to still be in the air. That story became a legend, but it wasn't unique. Throughout the A-10's history, there are dozens of accounts of Warthogs returning home with damage that should have been fatal. One came back with an entire engine missing. The titanium cockpit, the redundant systems, the separated engines, all of it came together in moments like these to bring pilots home who otherwise wouldn't have made it. The Air Force has tried to retire the A-10 at least 4 separate times. Not reduce the fleet, retire it completely. And every single time, Congress blocked it, or a war started, or the troops on the ground got so loud about losing their Warthog that the political pressure became impossible to ignore. In 2015, the Air Force scheduled full retirement to save $3.7 billion and redirect resources to the F-35. The House Armed Services Committee blocked it. In 2017, the Air Force officially stated the A-10 would remain in service permanently. A reversal so complete, it was almost embarrassing. And then in April 2026, just recently, a U.S. Air Force A-10 was shot down over the Persian Gulf during a combat search and rescue mission. The pilot ejected safely and was rescued. But the point stands. Nearly 50 years after it first flew, the Warthog is still out there. Still flying combat. Still getting shot at. Still coming home. Can the F-35 place the Warthog? The F-35 is stealthy where the A-10 is not. It has sensors that can theoretically identify ground targets from altitude, and putting an $80 million aircraft at low altitude over a hot battlefield is a genuine risk with the Warthog. Those arguments are real, but so is this. The F-35 costs $36,000 to $40,000 per flight hour. The A-10 gets around $17,000 to $20,000. The F-35 mission-capable rate sits around 51%, and no aircraft in existence can put ordnance as close to friendly troops as the A-10, in extreme cases, 20 feet. You cannot do that with a bomb dropped from altitude. The best summary anyone ever wrote on this came from a book called Tank Killing. If history tells us anything, it tells us that can openers are better than Swiss Army knives for opening cans. There is one group of people who never wavered in their support for the A-10 through every retirement attempt, every budget battle, every argument about supersonic fighters and stealth. The infantry, the soldiers and Marines on the ground. The ones who heard that engine sound overhead and felt it in their chest, because someone up there was looking out for them. The A-10 was never the coolest plane in the hangar. It was slow, ugly, and the Air Force brass never really loved it. But it was exactly what the guy on the ground needed. It could loiter for hours. It could fly low enough to actually see what was happening. It could take a beating and keep flying. The most expensive weapon in history sits in a hangar somewhere right now. Stealth-coated, sensor-fused, supersonic. And somewhere else, a pilot is climbing into an aircraft first built in 1977 that everyone in Washington has tried to retire 4 times. And the guys on the ground are quietly relieved, because the Warthog is up. Built to kill Soviet tanks that never came, retired 4 times, still flying combat in 2026. The A-10 Warthog survived not because it was the most advanced or the most beautiful, but because the people who needed it most refused to give it up. If you want the real stories behind the weapons the world remembers, subscribe to MisfireX. Drop a comment. Can the F-35 ever replace the Warthog? Or is there something about the A-10 that no technology can replicate? This is MisfireX. We find the misfires, we tell the truth.